The Kirby series has always been one of my favorite video game franchises for a long time now. From the fun gameplay, to the colorful environments, to the upbeat music, to the interesting lore, this series always makes for a great time. And this year marks Kirby's 30th anniversary, so how about we celebrate it? Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite elements from the series, its epic bosses. This series has a ton of great bosses that can make for an overall fun time, or can be a great challenge to the player. To mark such a memorable occasion, I've decided to up the ante a bit. We'll be taking a look at 20 of my favorite bosses throughout the series. A quick thing to note is that I'll only be talking about bosses from the main platformer games, not the various spin-offs. This is mostly due to the fact that I don't enjoy the bosses from the spin-offs nearly as much as the main games. Also, while not necessarily a rule, I'll only be doing one fight per character for the sake of variety. Different characters who fight similar to another character but are different enough will count for this list. And of course, these are all just my personal opinions. Also, something I should mention is that for the DS games, barring one, I had to record direct footage. So if the footage is a bit shaky, I apologize. I did the best I could. With all that out of the way, these are my top 20 favorite Kirby bosses. Right off the bat, this is one of the coolest designed bosses in the whole series. Like, a giant mechanical lobster. That's cooler than it probably should be. Heavy Lobster is first fought in Revenge of Mennonite. He's fought again in Milky Way Wishes, the Arena modes, and Meta Nightmare Ultra. It has some pretty cool attacks, like a flamethrower, mini Heavy Lobsters, and these paint blob things. It also likes to jump around and charge at you. If you suck up the paint blob, you can use the paint ability to blind it, making its movements unpredictable. And then there's its boss music, and guys, you didn't have to go this hard on a boss theme for a minor threat. While not a difficult boss, heck, it's a pretty short fight, it's still a fun battle and remains one of the most creative bosses in the series. Not really much else to say, it's a cool boss fight. While Kirby Squeak Squad is a great game, I'll admit that its boss lineup is one of its weaker aspects. They're either pathetic or annoying. The only exception to this is the leader of the Squeak Squad, the Roach. While his first battle is pretty fun, it definitely could have been a bit more challenging. Fortunately, we do get a harder fight in the form of Dark the Roach. His fight is largely the same as Base the Roach, but his attacks, aside from one, have been enhanced. He throws giant bombs that explode into a fire geyser, he'll fire a giant ice laser, and he'll shoot stars from his triple star rod, all while teleporting all over the arena. While those are his only attacks, he's very unpredictable with what attacks he'll use and where he'll appear. You'll definitely want to come in with a strong copy ability, cause this is a frantic fight that'll keep you on your toes. It's without a doubt the best boss in the game. Now if only the final boss was as good. Guess we know why Dark Nebula possessed the Roach, cause this thing's a joke. One of the coolest things about Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is that Master Hand from the Smash Bros series makes an appearance as a mid-boss throughout the game. It's a pretty fun fight on its own, but then you reach the boss of Candy Constellation, and both Master Hand and Crazy Hand show up to fight you. And it's the most thrilling fight in the game. Getting to take down Master Hand and Crazy Hand in Kirby's home territory, kinda, is pretty satisfying. The hands have some of their classic moves retained from Smash. Punching, slamming, firing bullets from their fingers, and trying to grab you. The hands also use team attacks throughout the fight, and can even collide with each other when doing a punch. Like with Dark the Roach, they're unpredictable with what attacks they'll use, and since you're dealing with two opponents, it could easily get overwhelming. It's basically like twin mid-bosses from the various games, but also not. While the fight does lose some of that spectacle from Smash Bros, it still manages to be a fun yet chaotic fight against the hands. This boss fight is a great nod to one of Nintendo's greatest franchises, though I find it kinda funny how the hands are more fun to fight in this game than in Smash Brothers. That's pretty sad when you think about it. Copy abilities are one of, if not the most iconic aspect of the Kirby series. With all the different kind of abilities there are, it's fun to just use most of them. Now, you'd think for how prominent copy abilities are that there would be more bosses centered around this mechanic. Well, one boss manages to use Kirby's abilities against him in one of the most creative bosses in the series. Miracle Matter is able to use all the copy abilities in Kirby 64 in some pretty cool ways, but the fight does something unique with this. You can suck up projectiles or remnants left from an ability to spit back at Miracle Matter, or just use that ability against it. However, you can only hit it with that ability when it's in that form. Any other ability will have no effect on it. So not only do you have to be cautious of a certain form's attacks, but you have to hurry to hit it with that ability before it reverts back to its original form. It's by far the hardest boss in the game because of its unique way of defeating it, and the music captures the chaotic nature of the fight. The unique concept of the fight alone makes this one of the best fights in the series, and fortunately it's equally as fun. Unfortunately for Miracle Matter, there can only be one copy ability master. Kinda. But we'll let that slide. King DDD, the greedy, self-proclaimed, commonly possessed anti-hero king of Dreamland. DDD has had a lot of boss fights over the years, and somehow they're crazier and weirder with each new entry. One of the most popular DDD boss fights though was Masked DDD from Superstar Ultra. And while that fight is really good, albeit really short and easy, it's not my favorite Masked DDD fight. Being fought right before the main antagonist, Termina uses his powers to control DDD, giving him his iconic mask and his brand new DDD hammer. The battle is what you'd expect from a DDD fight. He has all his usual attacks as well as attacks from his new hammer. It's actually a really easy fight, but things get more interesting in the second phase. Once you've depleted his health, Termina will use his powers to enhance DDD, turning his robe purple in the process, and then grabs a battle axe from one of the pillars before destroying both pillars. DDD has a lot of new attacks in this phase thanks to his new axe as well as help from Termina. It's still pretty easy, but it's a thrilling battle against your longtime rival, even if he's been possessed for like the 10th time now. The music that plays in the first phase is called Revenge of the Enemy. Pretty fitting if you ask me. But of course, we can't talk about Masked DDD without talking about his theme, and they really went all out with this remix. DDD's fights have just gotten crazier and crazier, and yet Masked DDD's Revenge still remains one of the best DDD fights in the series. But we're not done with Triple Deluxe just yet. Making his surprise reappearance as the final boss of DDD Tour, Dark Mennonite is back for revenge? Compared to his fight in Amazing Mirror and even other night fights, Dark Mennonite's Revenge has a lot of new attacks at his disposal. He has his usual attacks from basic yet powerful slashes to crescent shots to summoning giant swords with mirror portals and utilizing the 3D background with his tornado attack. But once he's at half health, he's through messing around. Using a mirror, he creates duplicates of himself to attack you. He'll swap himself around with his clones to try and fake you out. Find him, and you do big damage. He and his clones will also fly towards you from the back and foreground. Once he's back on the ground, he'll string together his combos, summon more giant swords, and create giant tornadoes from the background. And you're just trying to keep your distance the whole time. Like with Masked DDD, the music in the first phase is Revenge of the Enemy. But the music in the second phase is a faster paced remix of his theme from Amazing Mirror. This is an amazing fight that will be sure to keep you on the defense. However, part of the reason it's so low on the list is because his second phase move not only lasts a long time, but you can beat him pretty easily if you find the real Dark Mennonite, which kinda makes the fight lose its challenge. The other reason is that this isn't the best night fight. Far from it, actually. Still, it's a really well done fight in a game with some pretty mediocre bosses. Is that a hot take? I don't know. And it makes for a great surprise boss fight. You know, Corrupt Highness from Kirby Star Allies was a boss I never considered a favorite until pretty recently. But thinking about it and ranking the bosses in the game for this list, it's always been a fight I've thoroughly enjoyed. Corrupt Highness is a harder and more interesting version of Highness fought near the end of Heroes in Another Dimension, which, might I add, is one of the best post-game modes in any Kirby game. Compared to that fight, they really went all out with this boss because it gets hectic fast. Not only does he increase the number of certain projectiles, he's also much faster than he ever was before with every movement he makes. And when the hood comes off, things get even crazier. Using wooden puppets of the Mage Sisters, you'll use them for close combat or just toss them at you. They even have Highness's elemental attacks when he slams them into the ground. And in the third phase, he'll do a faster version of his friend wheel attack from his base fight, as well as using the wooden puppets as a shield while throwing energy balls. The music is the same track from base Highness's fight, with the first phase's music being unsettling while the second phase's is frantic. It's really cool how they managed to take a pretty underwhelming boss and make it one of the craziest fights in the game. It's a great final boss to an amazing mode. Or at least he would be, if he was the final boss. Instead, the three Mage Sisters decide to show up and try to obliterate you in one of the worst fights in the series. Fun times. Let's just get right to it. Marx is one of the creepiest antagonists in the series, and his soul form is terrifying. Everything that made his original battle great is amplified in this battle. From enhanced old attacks like Shooter Cutter, Seed Attack, Shadow Uppercut, and Ice Bomb, to new attacks like Splash Marks, yes, that's what it's called, and Deadly Ball. His other attacks, Mark's Laser, Black Hole, and his Arrow attack, aren't that different from his original fight. Still very dangerous though. His boss theme is as great as ever, and the arena is just a spectacle to behold. And of course, the death scream. Truly horrifying. It's not a very complex battle, but it also doesn't have to be. This final battle against the Mad Jester is still to this day one of the best final bosses in the series. And you wonder why I made him the main antagonist of my plush series. Well, there's many reasons, but details. Dark Matter has always been one of the more recurring villains in the series, with its role differing in each game. Being the final boss of Dreamland 2, being fought right before Zero in Dreamland 3, only being in cutscenes in Crystal Shards. After Crystal Shards, it seemed like Dark Matter was gone for good. Until a clone of it showed up as a boss in Planet Robobot and blew everyone's minds. You also fight it as Mennonite. That's a first. Dark Matter Clone is a recreation of its fight from Dreamland 2 with some new twists. It fires lasers from its sword, throws dark balls that can be knocked back, and charges at you with a replica of the Rainbow Sword. How ironic. The second phase is where things get interesting. Instead of turning into its real form, it stays in its swordsman form while its eye transitions from its head into its body. Gross. This phase is also a recreation of the second phase from Dreamland 2, firing lasers in all directions, firing electricity from its eye, and summoning these weird blob things. It's really cool how they implemented the second phase without changing forms. The music is a remix / combination of both of Dark Matter's themes from Dreamland 2, and it sounds amazing. Kirby Planet Robobot is a game with lots of fan service, before we got a game with lots of fan service. And Dark Matter Clone is a clear example of this. It's an amazing recreation of a boss from a pretty underrated game, and I somehow doubt this will be the last time we see Dark Matter in some shape or form. And speaking of Planet Robobot, its finale in the story mode is just wow. And just when you thought its final boss couldn't get any crazier, its harder variant is just insane. This boss has 4 different forms you have to deal with, and they're all pretty tough. Buckle up, we're gonna be here a while. In the first phase, Stardream Solo S will mainly attack with lasers. It'll also fire missiles, summon mechs, giant code cubes, and these heart things, charge at you in his most powerful attacks, summoning meteors and firing giant lasers. In the second phase, Stardream Solo S will attach to the Access Arc. It now has access get it, to several new attacks. The main one being its giant arms. It'll swipe at you with them, and it'll fire them across the screen. Once you've destroyed the front of the Access Arc, it's revealed that it's a galactic nova. In the third phase, Stardream will start off the fight by shooting lasers from its eyes and spinning around. After that, it will fire numbers at you, counting down after each attack. These attacks are based off of real-life objects, ranging from light bulbs to piano keys, and so on. If Stardream's countdown reaches 0, it'll unleash its most devastating attack, Fatal Error, which can do a lot of damage. You can survive it though. Barely. And then there's the final phase. Remember when I said that Planet Robobot has lots of fan service? This is another example of that. The first part of the battle is basically what would happen if the Nova's Nucleus fight from Superstar Ultra was on the ground. Not much happens in this part. It'll summon the occasional enemy though. Scary. Once you've destroyed all the pillars, the heart of Stardream will now attack. The heart will fire a laser across the arena before erupting from the ground, fire explosives at you, fire shooter cutters, and splitting in half before moving across the arena, and then recombines before unleashing a giant blast. When you've depleted its health, don't relax just yet, because the heart will unleash a last-ditch series of waves that will one-shot you unless you're at full health. Just make sure you jump over the last series of waves. As for the music, each phase's music is different, properly setting the tone for each phase. The track of the first part of the final phase is a recreation of Nova's theme, which is pretty cool. This can be a difficult and punishing fight, but it's one of the most epic final bosses in the series. The first phase is probably my favorite. Admittedly, the halberd sections aren't as fun as they used to be, hence why it's so low, but even with that in mind, it's still an amazing final battle. We finally made it into the top 10, and this is where my bias for a certain game starts to show. But these are my personal favorites, so don't be too surprised. With all that said, let's start off with a boss from the very recent Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This game is amazing, plain and simple. The levels are well designed, the copy abilities translate very well into 3D, the music is amazing as always, and the bosses are some of the best in the whole series. Case in point, Forgo Leon. Forgo Leon is a harder version of Leongar from the main story, and I actually almost went with that one, but the more I thought about it, Forgo Leon has more of that chaotic challenge that I enjoy. Being possessed by Soul Forgo, Forgo Leon starts off the fight in his second phase from his base fight. In fact, it's pretty much the same fight extended. Not saying that's a bad thing, it's still really fun. Once you've depleted his health, Soul Forgo would take full control of Leon. And this is where the fight gets tough. All of Leon's attacks from his original fight have been slightly enhanced. His claw swipes leave behind fire, he'll pounce more, and the shockwaves from his fist slams have lightning bolts. His fiery uppercut is more or less the same. Still a cool attack though. He also has his laser breath attack from the first phase, except it comes out faster and causes debris to fall. Once he's below half health, Forgo Leon will throw energy waves and fires a quick laser breath before Soul Forgo unleashes a big blast that can do serious damage. After that, the fight remains the same, except Soul Forgo will now appear to shoot an energy ball that will create a shockwave upon impact. This is where most of the challenge comes from. The boss music also makes this already intense battle even more so. It's just a really well designed battle that can get chaotic and difficult, but never feels unfair. But we're not done just yet. After you've defeated Forgo Leon, Soul Forgo decides to take matters into its own tentacles. But then the butterfly appears, and after absorbing Soul Forgo, it becomes Morphonite. Morphonite was first fought at the final boss of Guest Star mode in Kirby Star Allies after absorbing galactanite. And it was underwhelming. He did get a harder version in the final update, but it was more on the cheap side, at least for me. But this fight is a nice balance of the two. It's not unfairly hard, but it's far from easy. Morphonite fights similarly to Mennonite, but most of his attacks are completely different. More specifically, summoning Soul Forgo Ghost, slashing at you with two giant swords, and this wave attack thing. Landing hits can also be hard since he frequently teleports. It's a very frantic fight that will keep you on the edge of your seat. His boss theme also has leitmotif of the main theme, which is really cool. This is a much needed fight against the Fluttering Dream Eater, given how lackluster his original fight was, and how annoying his EX fight was. It's a very welcome surprise boss, and unlike the three Mage Sisters, it's a great final boss to an amazing post-game. Kirby's Return to Dreamland is another one of those games that just has a solid lineup of bosses. And one of the coolest by far is Metal General. I mean, they basically made him a mid-boss in Planet Robobot. Of course he's one of the coolest. Metal General has a huge arsenal of attacks. He's got a laser sword, he's got missiles, he's got mines, he's got drones, and he's got giant rockets. As one does. The rockets are arguably his most dangerous attack, since when they explode, they'll leave fire on the ground for a limited time. You can also fly through the air and will attempt to ram into you while having an electric shield activated. It's not a very complex battle, but it's a really fun one, especially its EX version. Once you've defeated the EX version, well, we'll get back to that. Krakow has always been one of my favorite boss characters in the series. There's just something about this one-eyed cloud that I find appealing. Though admittedly, his boss fights seem to vary in quality with each game. Some are good, some not so much. There is one version that manages to stand out from all the others. While Krakow's boss fight in Star Allies was... yeah. Heroes in Another Dimension gives Krakow a much needed upgrade. Similar to Forgo Leon, Parallel Krakow starts out as Parallel Twin Krakow, with the fight playing out the same way. Once you've defeated them, Parallel Krakow becomes Parallel Big Krakow. And this is where things get interesting. The fight is what you'd expect from a Krakow fight, but due to his massive size, it's pretty easy to get hit by him. Not to mention, he's pretty fast this time around. He also has a new attack, Windy Thunderstorm, which seems pretty self-explanatory. If not, then I don't know what to tell you. It's pretty hard to dodge depending on what copy ability or dream friend you have. And then there's the music, which is a faster paced rock remix of the main boss theme. And it's so good. This is the best direction they could have went for making a harder Krakow fight. And as a result, it's his best one yet. And it's very well deserved. Coming back to Return to Dreamland, we have Metal General EX's giant robot buddy, HRD3. After defeating Metal General EX, he'll fly off and summon HRD3 to finish you off. In the first phase, HRD3 will stay in the background throwing punches, shooting lasers from its eyes, and spin around. Metal General EX will also fire missiles that will slowly rain down. The only way to damage HRD3 is to hit its arms when he throws punches. This first phase is easy, but it's more of a warm-up for the second phase. HRD3 will then fly up and crash onto the arena, where it will then fire a giant laser. This phase is really more of the same, throwing punches and spinning around. It can also do a body slam, which covers a good portion of the arena. Occasionally, it will go into the background and perform the same attacks from the first phase, minus the spinning. If you have a copy ability, you can finish this pretty quickly. But if you choose to go in without one, this fight can be pretty challenging and, in my opinion, more fun. The music for both phases are Grand Doomer and Landia's boss themes, but surprisingly, they fit pretty well for this fight. HRD3 is a great surprise for the game's extra mode and is equally a great fight. Nothing like taking down a giant robot to make you feel like a boss. And then they did it again for Planet Robobot, but it was purely a gimmick fight for the Robobot armor. Yeah, no. The greatest warrior in the galaxy, Galactanite. The one boss that just keeps coming back. Regardless, he's still a cool character, and his surprise appearance in Return to Dreamland is really good. Galactanite is what you'd expect from your typical knight fight. Sword slashes, tornadoes, more sword slashes. Galactanite does have different attacks though. He can summon lightning bolts, he can fire a revolving laser, and he can fire energy swords. There's enough new attacks here to make this fight unique. And the music is just as great. While the first phase starts off with Landia's theme, it'll transition to a remix of his theme from Superstar Ultra. Despite my feelings for this character and his many reappearances, I won't deny that this fight is amazing. Now, I could have just put Galactanite Returns here as well, since they're basically the same fight, but something about the atmosphere for this fight makes it stand out. Plus, getting to fight him with any character does help a bit. This is probably the best fight against him yet. And yet, that's not even the best knight fight. Being fought in the Coliseum in Waddle Dee Town, Meta Knight challenges Kirby to a friendly 1v1. And it's amazing. The idea of fighting Meta Knight in a 3D game was so exciting to me, and when it came time to fight him, it did not disappoint. Though that's basically Forgotten Land in a nutshell. Meta Knight's arsenal may not seem that big when compared to other fights, but he still puts up a great fight. Dodging all of his attacks, especially with the new dodge mechanic, just feels good. Besides, he still has a few tricks up his sleeves, like using the wind to drop a wave of boulders, or his down thrust creating energy pillars, or firing a flurry of crescent shots. He can also dash towards you and catch you in his most powerful attack, Upper Caliber. But with the sword ability, you can initiate a clash and knock Meta Knight's sword out of his hand. And you can grab it. If you do, he'll pull out a backup sword which looks vaguely familiar. And his boss theme, Good lord. This may be the best Mennonite boss theme ever. This fight is thrilling from beginning to end, and is made even more fun with the sword ability, putting you at an even field with Mennonite. Now, there's actually a harder version of Mennonite fought in the Ultimate Cup Z, known as Phantom Mennonite. And yeah, he's on here too. This may seem like cheating, but their fights are pretty similar. The only difference is that Phantom Mennonite's attacks are extended, and he'll mix up his attacks. These fights are amazing. This is exactly what I wanted in a fight with Mennonite in a 3D game. They're without a doubt the best battles against Mennonite yet. The true destroyer of worlds, Void Termina. I've already gone over this boss in my top 10 favorite final bosses video, so I'll try to keep this segment brief. Void Termina EX, or Void, has 4 different phases. The ground phase, the cocoon phase, the flying phase, and the core phase. These phases constantly change up the fight to make it unique and fun. And it's certainly a challenging one. This behemoth's attacks are strong, fast, and have quite a bit of range. By the time you make it to the core, it's throwing every attack it has in its arsenal at you, including attacks from other final bosses in the series, including Dark Matter. They always come back. You'll have to constantly be on the defense to even stand a chance. Or just abuse invincibility frames, that works too. While not the hardest boss in the game, it's still plenty challenging. And even then, Void handles the difficulty much better than those hardest bosses. I'll take easier but fair over harder but cheap any day. There, that was a pretty short segment, don't you think? Moving on. Kirby and the Forgotten Land has some of the best post-game in the series, as evidenced by Forgo Leon and Morphonite. What I didn't say is that all of that post-game is canon. I think that's a first for the series. This also includes the final boss of the Ultimate Cup Z. After defeating Morphonite, Soul Forgo will retreat, and using the souls of the Beast Pack and Morphonite's power, it transforms into its most powerful form yet, Chaos Ephelis. All of its attacks as Fecto Ephelis have been greatly enhanced, and it has some new ones as well. The biggest change is that Chaos Ephelis can now teleport, making it more unpredictable, especially with its spear. Chaos Ephelis will now take more advantage of Rift, either going through them itself or firing lasers through them. It can also summon a giant phantom that will try to demolish you with its giant spear. This battle is pretty hard, and it demands that you have dodging mastered. But then there's the second phase. After you separate its soul from its body using Dome Mouth, the body will turn into orbs that surround the soul. Now, its attacks aren't as hard to dodge as the first phase, but all of its attacks do a ludicrous amount of damage. So again, dodging is pretty much required. The soul will mainly fire lasers from the orbs. In fact, one attack with the lasers have the orbs spinning around the soul, making dodging the lasers much harder. Its other attacks are taken from other soul bosses: a black hole, shooter cutter, splash rush, deadly bound, and deadly sun. The latter being a hard attack to avoid since you have to climb under debris that's high enough from the deadly sun. If you're doing this with no ability, you can actually suck up the orbs surrounding the soul to use as projectiles. Now, as for the music, titled 2 Planets Approaching the Roach Limit, I'll admit that I wasn't crazy about it at first, but listening to it more and more, it's quickly become one of my favorite Kirby boss themes. This is the hardest boss in the game, and it will not hesitate to let you know that. But man, it's amazing from start to finish. And like I said, this final battle is canon, making the ending to this fight just as satisfying as the final blow. What a way to end an amazing game. I keep hearing people talk about how Kirby Planet Robobot perfected the modern Kirby formula. Well, I would argue they perfected it 5 years prior to Planet Robobot. Kirby's Return to Dreamland might be my favorite game in the franchise. It's all just put together so well. And nowhere is that more apparent than the game's finale. Chasing down Magalor through another dimension on Landia, fighting the ship you helped put back together, using super abilities on Magalor, it's all so good. And it all leads up to the final boss. More specifically, Magalor's soul, which is apparently the Master Crown taking over Magalor. Magalor's soul has a few of the same attacks from his previous battle as Magalor EX, along with some new ones. He can summon enemies, travel through portals, create shapes. He can summon thorns, shoot lasers through portals, and can turn the whole screen upside down. Yeah, cause things weren't hard enough. And then there's arguably the best part of the battle. You just used super abilities on Magalor, now it's his turn to use them on you. From an icy Grand Hammer, to dark Ultra Swords, to blue Monster Flames, to double Flare Beams, to say he has a lot of attacks would be an understatement. It truly feels like this manifestation is throwing everything it has at you. And all the while, you're treated to one of the best final boss themes in the series, Crowned, which is filled with so much leitmotif. This is one of the best designed final bosses in the whole series that adds to one of many epic finales, and it's made even more satisfying when you land the final blow on Magalor, regardless if he was in control or not. It looks like he's learned his lesson after all that. Let's at least hope so. This is one of many reasons why I love Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Choosing between the final two was pretty hard, and even now, the ranking of these two could change depending on the day. Like, I might prefer Chaos Ephelis, but just barely. I think what gives Magalor's soul the edge over Chaos Ephelis, aside from nostalgia, is how creative it is. Having the final boss use the game's main gimmick against you is always really cool, like Crash 4's final boss. Either way, both bosses are really well designed, and they capture what make Kirby bosses so great. I really enjoyed making this list. It was fun getting to talk about my favorite bosses from one of my favorite franchises. And who knows, maybe you'll see more Kirby stuff this year. Until then, happy 30th anniversary, Kirby.